you're both there together.
Yeah, we're on another shoot on something else.
Oh, wow. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Well, thank you. I'll just jump right in. Thank you both so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. That was a beautiful film. It is an absolutely beautiful film. Honestly, Shane, Tom, it's incredible. Um,
Thank you.
Thank you. You're good, man. Thanks, man.
I just showed up. Shane did everything else.
no,
I
but
feel the
you.
same way. I just pointed a camera and he did everything.
Well, see, that's a quality team right there. Is very humble. But you know what? I will say, both of you did do something. Let's Tom, let's start with you. Was this difficult for you? I know you'd written the book, but was it difficult for you to open up your life story like this on film?
Well, like a lot of things in life that are easy to do, it's not always as easy to look back at it, you know what I mean, or to share it. So it was another step. I mean, people reading the book and having that resonate with them, I felt that more than just that it was time. I never felt that it was time for me to write a book. I also felt that it was never time for me to make a movie about the book. But these things came along, and I'm the last man standing, so I had to be honest. And my mother was the last woman standing, so she had to be honest. So there was truths that came out in this that otherwise wouldn't have been written the same way and wouldn't have been told the same way. And there's truths that probably wouldn't have made it out of the vaults that they were kept in for 53 years had not Shane pointed a camera at me and my mom and my daughter.
Wow. Yeah, and I mean it's amazing, and the just the authenticity, the openness there is just remarkable. And so, I mean, he Tom shares the fact that this may not have happened without the camera there. Shane, how did the camera get there? How did you get involved?
It's interesting. Well, the some projects, you're like, oh, I read this book. I really want to do something with this. And you pursue the rights and you dream about it in all these different ways. This was the opposite of that, in the sense that, not that I didn't want to do it, not at all. I shouldn't have said the opposite. But what happened was a producer called me and said, I have the rights to this book about Tom Wilson's life story. Would you like to work on the documentary about it? So I was like, oh, geez, I don't know. Like, in person discovers their indigenous heritage and now wants to make a movie about it. I'm like, I don't know if that's going to be, you hear a lot of that stuff, right? Oh, I had a Cherokee grandmother, 20 generations ago. And it's just like, is that what this is? And then the first thing I read was an article online about Tom speaking about it. And he was saying that the first thing, the most important part about him is that he has to find his way back to his identity and walk a path and understand who he is over time and be respectful. And he's in no rush, and he doesn't want to take up any space other than telling his own truth. And that was very, very comforting to me, to be like, okay, this guy's got it. He's coming from the right place. And then I read the book, and I was just right from the first chapter, where it ends with Bunny, his adopted mother, saying, there are secrets about you I'll take to my grave. And once I read that, I'm like, okay, I'm hooked. I must know how the story ends and how it all develops. And that was the first part of it. You read a book and you're like, that's something. And you meet with I met with Tom, and it was just a chance to see, like, well, it's all cool that I think he's cool, but do we get along? And in very quick order, Tom had me laughing my guts out. And I was like, okay, this is going to be something that would be really fun to do. And then we moved away from laughter and chit chat into some deep politics. And we were able to kind of walk that tightrope really, really cleanly with each other, to be really honest and candid, and political and emotional, and then also just laugh and have a good time and sort of clear the air and be really respective of the space that we each are trying to create to tell this story. So it was joyous just to meet him and go from there.
Yeah. Well, this is one of those films that focuses so much on the idea of memory, the concept of memory. And even Shane, I love that when we're going through past stories, we've got the films on, almost the Super 8 films or whatever, on the side of the trailer. what is your experience, Tom, of, sounds strange to say, what are your experiences of memory? But memories can be blurry. They can change over time. Um, have your views of what's of your life story changed over time? Is it
Um,
difficult to recall?
well, I mean, because I have put so many defense mechanisms in place in myself that I usually rely on other people to tell me what the reality is, in some ways. That might be difficult. I forgive you if you don't understand that, or don't. I hope that, is that clear enough? Well, basically, um, anything that I might have said that I thought, I wonder if I'm getting this right or wrong, was that thought was erased because Janie would come forward, or my daughter Madeline would come forward and say it in a different way, or give examples of what it is that I thought was the truth, and bring it back to me so I would hear it from them. And if you can't trust your mother and your daughter, then you pretty well should go find a box to live in somewhere.
Well, you know what, you brought up Janie, and I'll ask both of you, because Shane, you were there through this process too. What, did she say anything about what this was like for her? Because I mean, this is, like you said, your adopted mother kept this to her grave,
Hmm.
and then finally, it's sort of like everything is coming back together in a more full sense.
Well, you know what? Jeannie said, that she made a vow.
Yes.
And my daughter, who was, I think, about 7 months pregnant when she was interviewed for this, said, she comes right out. She, a Mohawk woman, she goes, "It wasn't a vow, it was a threat." And I swear to God, it's almost like the screen exploded in color to me. It was almost like, when the truths came out in this film. And it took me a while to watch this film through, trust me. But when I finally got to being able to see the entire thing at once, it was almost like bursts of color coming off the screen when some of these truths would come forward from my daughter and from my mother, because I couldn't have said it more honestly and more eloquently than those two. I
Mm.
kind of stumble through the film, and they just kind of glide over it with their angelic wings and their halos.
And Janie's participation with the documentary was interesting because we began. I noted that I first met Tom and we got along, and now let's pursue this project together and try to figure out a way to tell the story. And by the way, Shane, my mother Janie will not participate with you in this documentary, and she will not be on camera. I'm like, okay, all right, well, yeah, that's fine. And then slowly you kind of, you build a trusting relationship with Tom. It's like, well, maybe you should meet Janie and just sort of tell her what you're doing and see what happens. So then I met Janie and then formed a relationship very quickly with Janie, where I'm the youngest sibling, and so I'm kind of like, hey, how's it going? Everything's great, just a very positive, bouncy kind of energy. And she responded to that. She loves Tom's dog, and I think I reminded her of a puppy. And so she was very willing to sort of say, you know what, I trust this young man to be honest and to let. And I gave Janie a very honest deal, which was, listen, if you say something you don't want us to use, we won't use it. I'm not here to make a propaganda film in a sense. It's not that it's releasing editorial control, but it's also like, this is someone's life, and I want them to feel comfortable with what they saying also being true, but being something that they can live with. And that's a balance that I think I had to respect where Janie was coming from in the life that she lived. And then I thought we would wind up just sort of skimming the surface of the story. And then once the camera started rolling, and I'm sure other documentarians tell you this over the years of your reporting, that sometimes you want to take credit for what happens in a movie making process as a documentarian, but the truth is you're creating an opportunity, a space for a confessional. And sometimes people just dive into the moment, and you could imagine what it would be like to live underneath that threat for so long as she had, and then to just say, you know what, now this is my time to tell my truth. And that was just a lucky coincidence that the timing of the camera was the timing when she was ready to say what she had to say.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that you talk about truth there, because I think one of the things that works so beautifully in this film. It almost works on two levels. This concept of reconciliation. Um, you know what? Because at one point we're dealing with Tom's heritage, and at one point we're dealing with Tom's family. Um, and I mean, Tom, you know, for you, one of the things that I was intrigued with is this idea of what has that process been like for you, reconciling those two things, and what have you learned along the way?
Well, a reconciliation is a difficult word. It's a word that I would like to see a day where we never have to be able to have to use that word, you know? Um, reconciling with my own story, do you mean, or reconciling with
Well,
the,
reconciling with, well, actually, yes, partially reconciling with your story, with your heritage, and
uh-huh.
also reconciling with your family, because it seems to there's almost two portions with the same theme within the film.
Okay, well, first of all, my reconciling with the story that I was given for 53 years, I think is really the most important reconciling. And that reconciliation started when I sat down to write the first book. So let me just say that there's no quick answers. There's no drive-through answers. There's no, turnkey solutions here. That this is a process that I expect to take, if I have 20 more years on this planet, I expect it to take 20 more years. When I sat down to write the first book, I've described it as sitting down with a heart that was black with anger. And as I started to write, I also say that all the sludge at the bottom of my lake started to get stirred up and dissipate and start to, rise up to the top. What I have, my heart started to come back and take color, because as I was writing about Bunny and George Wilson, I was writing about all the people that lied to me in my life. I realized just how much effort they made, and how much love they had for me, even if it was untruthful, they were still trying. And so I started to love all these people like I did when I was a kid. And that's a pretty good way to start reconciling, is by having an understanding of the people that you're writing about. The film is also another step towards that reconciliation. Um, we've we found where everybody's buried, where all the truths are buried, and revealing them is going to take even beyond this film. You know what I mean? It's going to be a continuing process. I hope that was a decent answer. I got to tell you, I'm terribly ADD, and there's a film crew around here, and every time they go to move something, I get really interested in it, and I stop being interested in you, and I have no idea why.
On the bit about reconciliation, I think that part of it is that truth has to be spoken, truth has to be heard, and truth has to be processed. So you can't have reconciliation without truth being spoken and then understood. So I think that, in terms of, that's the bigger, colonial and decolonial project that's going on, writ large at this moment in Indigenous communities. But in terms of Tom's life, how that manifests in an individual person is that it's, the concept is where Tom, as a human being who's making an understanding of his truth, could feel that he's putting on a costume as like, oh, I'm going to take down something that's Indigenous and put it onto myself. But that's not what's happening. Tom is removing the shackles and the years of lies and the colonial image of himself that was put upon him, and revealing his true self as a Mohawk person. This Mohawk thing that we're talking about, his indigeneity, is something that it's so deep it goes back every generation. Both his parents are Mohawk. So for Tom to step forward in the way that he has is ultimately removing layers and trying to reconcile with the truth of who he actually is, not who he was told he was.
What a revelation, eh? Honest to God, everything came so clear when Shane said that,
Yeah.
Wow. It still does.
That's incredible. Well, thank you to you both. I honestly, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you're both busy, and I appreciate the chance to chat with you. It's a wonderful film. I do love your work. I will say, Tom, I love Junkhouse, and Shane, I
You
love
look
Red
about the
Rover.
right age.
I am. I am.
You
I
know
remember,
what?
I was like, oh my gosh, yes.
You know what? I'd say that, Junkhouse played for thousands, tens, maybe, well, definitely hundreds of thousands of people during their spurt. And a lot of times I run into fellas like you, and a lot of times they say, "Oh man, saw Junkhouse at the blank, blank, blank town pump in Vancouver. You guys were great. I got the shit beaten out of me that night." Most people who came to our shows usually got the shit beaten out of them. Still love the band. I have no idea why.
That should have been on the poster. That's
Yeah. Come and get the
free
shit
with
beaten out of
admission. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
No, gentlemen, honestly, I really appreciate the chance to chat with you, and I wish you the best for the film, and thank you so much.
Thanks. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks very much.
Have a great day.
You too.
Sure.
Bye.
Bye.